One is discuss the significance of the civilizations of the ancient world. Discuss the significance of the civilizations of the ancient world. And so you can look at that a number of different ways. What's so great about the civilizations of the ancient world? Well, what are the civilizations of the ancient world? We've seen the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Neo-Babylonians, the Persians. We've also mentioned the Jews who were in Judah and ancient Israel as well. What's so great about these civilizations? Well, so far you've done discussion questions on Jared Diamond's thesis on guns, germs, and steel. You've done discussion questions on primary documents like Psalm 137, what does that tell us? On the Behistun inscription, what does that tell us? And they tell us a lot, and they tell us a lot about the significance of these civilizations, what's so great about these civilizations. And so you want to break it down. These civilizations had significant leaders like Sargon, Hammurabi, Ashurbanipal in Assyria, Nebuchadnezzar. All of these, if you were to research even just a little of these leaders, if you're to look in Tom Holland in Persian Fire in the appendix, you'll see a lot about these leaders. And our discussion of the Behistun inscription and Tom Holland's discussion on page in chapter 2, it takes a lot to be a leader in the ancient world. You have to have the pedigree, you have to have the backstory, you have to have the religious connection, you have to be able to conquer, you have to be able to administrate. Darius the Great was a great administrator. It takes a lot to be a leader. These are impressive characters, even if perhaps they wouldn't be our style of democratic leader today. They're certainly impressive. Engineering, it's not hard to find the great engineering feats of the ancient world. And you can look at the documentary Engineering and Empire to see some of what the Persians achieved. Everyone knows what the ancient Egyptians achieved. There's also an Engineering and Empire episode on that. And you can research through those documentaries and discuss what are the great engineering feats of these ancient civilizations. And often overlooked is the intellectual, philosophical contribution of these civilizations. For example, the Assyrians are often overlooked. A lot of what the Assyrians did in terms of their written works, their works that are preserved in clay tablets, are often overlooked. The Assyrians are seen as a brutal, militaristic civilization, not seen as an intellectual civilization. The Babylonians get a bad rap because of the Bible. They're the bad guys in the Bible. They're the bad guys in Bob Marley songs, Ancient Babylon. But they also had a significant intellectual and philosophical legacy as well. And what's the most famous intellectual, philosophical work of the ancient world? Perhaps the Epic of Gilgamesh. That's a perfect example that shows how the ancients in Sumeria and these other civilizations had a complex outlook. And even if you go to the footnotes for chapter 2 of Persian Fire, you'll see these other sources you can look up. And taken together, it shows that there's a strong intellectual production, a literary production in the ancient world. The Enuma Elish, the books of the Bible like Jeremiah, inscriptions like Nabonidus inscription and the Behistun inscription, the Cyrus cylinder, the clay tablets that contain the instructions of Shurappak, the Assyrian leader, and other inscriptions by the Persians, etc. As the ancients in the Middle East can compete with any civilization, any Roman civilization, any Egyptian or Greek civilization for their intellectual output. And so if you start your paper with your discussion questions, you start to flesh it out based on some of these categories, you will do what a historian does and gather evidence and emphasize what you want to emphasize, quote from book from Tom Holland and elsewhere, and before you know it, you'll have a strong paper discussing the significance of ancient Mesopotamia. And then you could wrap it up by discussing the legacy. That great word in history, legacy. What did they leave behind? What's the legacy of these civilizations? And you could do worse than see the page of the Semitic Museum in Harvard, where they talk every day. Their job in Harvard today is to talk about the legacy of the ancient world. What did they leave behind? What can we learn from them today? What's going on in the world today with ISIS, and how is ISIS treating the legacy of these ancient civilizations? That's something you could mention in your conclusion as you wrap up the paper also.